Greetings. It's been a while since I've put together something to share, and I'm not sure if this will get posted or not. The content may be not to the liking of certain platforms that I go on, but regardless, I'm going to record it, and if I feel like it'll be taken down, I'll just share it through other channels. But let's get started anyway and get going. So I wanted to cover the current state of affairs and also do a little quick comparison to prophecies that relate to the subject matter that I'm talking about. I also want to clarify how to relate to the prophecies in a common sense manner and not, there's a lot of speculation out there, and a lot of people take scriptures and they just kind of speculate on what it means nowadays. But let's just be real and say what we know and say what we don't know. That's my hope in this video. But we're still going to bring out some pretty pertinent points that we need to really take notice of. So let's start with this. When we look at the prophecies given to Jesus at his first coming, and how they came to pass, it gives us a much better understanding on how to look at the prophecies of his second coming. In other words, what were the prophecies of his first coming, and how did they actually come to pass? There were people sitting there saying, okay, well, this is going to happen, and it says this is going to happen, and that's going to happen. Let's kind of take a look at it. So let's just take one of them, for instance. Let's take the prophecy of Jesus being born in Bethlehem. It says that the Messiah would come and be born in Bethlehem. Now, nobody would have known that the powers to be in Rome at that time that had dominance over Israel would call for a census to count all the people that required all the citizens to go back to their place of origin. So what happened? They called for a census. Everyone had to be counted. In order to be counted, you had to go back to your place of origin. So if you were Jewish at that time, you knew that the time of the Messiah's coming was at hand. You just didn't know how. So there were prophecies telling the Jewish people that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. But the census was God's way that he used to make this happen, because Mary and Joseph had to go and return to Bethlehem, and that's where Jesus was born according to the scriptures. So if you were looking for his appearance at that time, you would have known the scriptures regarding his soon appearance, but not how God would make it come to pass. So in the same way, we have to look at the second coming. We know what will eventually or ultimately happen, but we do not know how God's going to bring it to pass. So God has given us clear road signs, though, that we are in that time frame of his second coming. Why do I say that? Well, there's prophecy that Israel would be reborn after a long dispersion throughout the whole earth. The Jews would be dispersed throughout the whole planet, and then at the end, he would bring them together as a nation for the final time. That happened in 1948. He also says that they would control Jerusalem. Now, that happened in the Six-Day War of 1967. I could list a lot of other things here that have happened according to the scriptures. I mean, Israel, before they came back, it was a barren wasteland there. It was dust. Mark Twain said nothing could ever live here when he wrote, when he had visited that land, and he wrote in some of his journals that nothing could possibly live here. Now it's blooming and flourishing, and they have some of the best fruit on the planet. That was prophesied that would happen. So it is clear, and it says in the end times this will happen. So it is clear we are living in that time frame. What does that mean to us? Time frame. Does that mean a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 100 years? Let's just kind of look a little closer, and we can begin to draw in and kind of see where we're at here. So there were certain things that had to take place according to the prophecies of Jesus' return. So let's cover a couple of the quick of what I see that is actually coming to pass now that we need to keep our eyes on. There are certain things that have to take place. Let's just start with this. There must be a one world currency in place. with a central point of control, with the ability to turn it on or off for each individual on the planet. And there has never been a time or a system available for that to happen, but now there is. In fact, I'm going to show you a quick clip from China. They are using such a system right now. They are giving their citizens scores as to whether they are good and comply with the government or they are not. So let's take a quick look at that.
Instantly put a face to a name. Now the Chinese are also ranked, given a mark out of a possible 950 points.
So what must happen for this to occur on a larger scale? Well, our current system has to collapse or change. And this is already in the works. So what I'm going to play you now is a clip of a meeting that happened by the FDIC, the federal. It's the company that guarantees your money when you put it in the bank. You know, when you put your money in the bank, it's FDIC insured for like $250,000 per account. Well, this is a meeting where they got together. They get together at the end of the year. So this was from the end of this last year. And they are talking about a bail-in. Now, I don't know if you know what a bail-in is, but a bail-out is what happened last time, where the government bailed out the banks and gave them money. A bail-in is when the bank takes the money that's in the bank, which is your money and my money. So basically, it happened to Greece a few years back. If you had $50,000 in the bank, the bank said, well, we need 30 of it, so you only got 20. So they just take your money. Basically, it's in their bank and they take it. So that's what a bail-in is. Also, to note in this clip that I'm going to play, it's not very long, it's less than a minute. They talk about should the citizens know that we don't have the money to cover this $250,000 insurance. In other words, in fact, the money that they have is that they need to insure, they only have about 1% of it. So they don't have your money. So they start talking about at the end, should we tell the people? And they're like, we can't tell the people that we don't have their money. So here's that clip from the FDIC. Let's take a quick look at that.
Right? I mean, it's important that people understand they can be bailed in, but you don't want a huge run on the institution. But they have, I mean, they're going to be. And it could be an early warning signal to the FDIC and the primary regulators when these things happen. And there may be some other prices. This is similar to what Jay was saying in the market that you can tell whether people understand how who's going to be protected, who isn't going to be protected.
Should be accessible when people need to know, but I don't think you have much hope of reaching a public that doesn't have a professional need to know.
I completely agree with that. I almost think you'd scare the public if you put this out. Like, why are they telling me this? Should I be concerned about my bank? Like, my insurance company doesn't tell me what they're doing with my assets. They just assume they're going to pay my claim, right? I think you've got to think of the unintended consequences of taking a public that has more full faith and confidence in the banking system than maybe people in this room do, that we want them to have full faith and confidence in the banking system. They know the FDIC insurance is there. They know it works. They put their money in. They're going to get their money out. So there's a select crowd of people that are in the institutional side. And if they want to understand this, they're going to find a way to understand.
Okay. Also to note that we're going to need to have, I hope you were enlightened by that your money is not safe. But I'm not here to scare you. I'm just telling you, the system is broken. Okay. There is going to be a new economy. And the World Economic Forum is already planning that. They just had a meeting for 2023, Davos, World Economic Forum. And here is a quick clip of one of the opening sessions. It's only a few seconds long. I want you to listen to her talking about, we are going to talk about the new economy and the new society. So this is already in the works. Let's take a quick listen.
Hello and welcome to an issue briefing on 2023 Explained, the Chief Economist's briefing. My name is Sadia Zahidi. I'm a managing director at the World Economic Forum, heading the work on the Center for the New Economy and Society.
Okay, so I hope that was rather enlightening. Let's also look at ways back, I believe in the summer of last year, I did an update where I covered the World Economic Forum's 8 things that they need to get done by 2030. I'm going to just insert some of these slides as I'm talking. Here's a slide that talks about the United States has to go down. In other words, they're going to try and, we're not going to be the leading nation of the world. And they're already working on that one. They got the perfect people in place for that. Also, the whole West and how we do things over here has to go away. And it also talks about, there's another slide that talks about there's going to be a group of nations that are going to lead the way. Now, on that note, I want you to understand that if you listen to any of my videos, you know that in Daniel, the 2nd chapter, Daniel had a vision. Daniel didn't know. He explained Nebuchadnezzar's vision that Nebuchadnezzar had that explains this world system. And at the end, there is a 10-nation confederacy that comes to pass. And in fact, it says when these 10 nations come, Jesus will return. So is this the 10 nations? We don't know. Just like just like in the first coming, we weren't sure how God's going to pull it off, but we are close enough for God to pull it off. So it's something to keep an eye on. Okay. So this is what I want to get across. Given the first 4 seals that are open in Revelation, I believe that's chapter 6. The first 4 seals are opened. Certain things have to happen. So let's look at those 4 seals real quick. I'm not going to bring them up on the screen. I just want to tell you what they are. First of all, the first seal is there will be a push for a one world system to unify. And there will be a man behind that. It says a man on a white horse will go forth conquering and to conquer. In other words, he wants to unify everybody. That's the first seal. The second seal is there will be wars. I mean, we've already started seeing that. There are wars, and it's going to be worse. That's the second seal. The third seal is there will be a total financial collapse. It ends in the rationing of food. In other words, it's going to be a day's wages just to get the food that you need to eat. So that's the third seal. What's the fourth seal? The fourth seal is there will be an outbreak. There'll be pestilence and disease. So I'm sure if we look at these 4 things, we can see that there are multiple ways all these things could come to pass in these days. I mean, is what's happening right now those seals? I personally don't think so. I think it's going to get worse, but everything that needs to happen with those seals is already easily done in this society, easily done. The one world money system, the wars, the rationing of food, the outbreak of pestilence and disease. I mean, they shut down the whole world with one a few years ago. So I'm sure we can see that it's clear that they can do these things. So I just want to end with this. I want you to understand the apostles, when Jesus came and they recognized him as the Messiah, they didn't understand his first coming and his second coming. Because according to the Jewish scriptures, there is a Messiah ben David and a Messiah ben Joseph. Messiah ben David is when Messiah comes, sits in David's throne in Jerusalem and rules the world from David's throne. Messiah ben Joseph is a suffering Messiah. They could not grasp this being the same person. So if you notice the apostles, their expectation was that Jesus was the Messiah that was going to set up his kingdom. In fact, when Peter, James, and John were on the mountain and the transfiguration happened, where Moses and Elijah and Jesus were transfigured before them, and they were having their it was like a supernatural staff meeting. Peter was like, let's build altars, let's build tabernacles, let's, this is the deal, this is it, man. Because they were expecting Jesus to set up his kingdom. Also, twice a year, the male Jewish people, men, were required to go to Jerusalem for certain feasts. They went there and they came to Jesus, who was sitting by the temple, and said, take a look at the temple. Isn't it magnificent? Expecting Jesus to be the one that was going to sit in the temple and say, I'm here, this is it, let's do it. But Jesus totally messed with their head and said, you see this right here? There's not one stone here that's not going to be left upside down and turned over. And they were like, explain that. They came to him that night and said, explain that. What do you mean? When is the sign of your coming? And when will be the... They did not understand that he was Messiah ben Joseph the first time and David the second time. They didn't understand that. Even when they came to take Jesus to crucify him, Peter cut the ear off of the guy and said, you ain't taking him. He's the Messiah. And Jesus said, I have to do this. He explained it to him. Even after he was crucified and he was in the tomb, they were hiding in an upper room somewhere because they couldn't figure it out. They're like, what the heck? This guy was doing miracles and all this stuff. I seen him transfigured on the mountain, and it's like, and now he's gone. They couldn't put together that he was Messiah, the suffering Messiah the first time, and the ruling Messiah was going to happen afterward. So those expectations of him led them to the questions at the Olivet Discourse, like, when is the sign, what's going to be the sign of your coming? And then Jesus jumps to his second coming and gives us all these signs. There'll be wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes, which huge week for earthquakes. Turkey is completely devastated by earthquakes right now, and they're still going on. But anyway, earthquakes, pestilences, all these things happening in the earth. Jesus said, these will be the signs of my coming back. So before I end this video, two quick things. Number one, there is a distinction between his second coming for the Jewish people to set up the kingdom, which he rules from Jerusalem, and him coming back for the church. We have to understand that the 7-year tribulation that Daniel talked about, where the world is in total chaos, the whole reason for that is to bring the nation of Israel to its knees so that they recognize Jesus as their Messiah. It's not for the church. We're not here, like Paul said, we're not here to go through the wrath of God. That is for Israel so that they get the revelation that Jesus is the Messiah. We already know that. In fact, Jesus said that the gates of hell will not prevail against us. So we're not going to be here in a world where demons are running wild, because we can tread on serpents and scorpions and demons and demonic powers. We're not going to be here during that time. Suffice it to say, Jesus at the Last Supper told the disciples that in John 14, verse 3, I believe. Good read. Check it out. Jesus said, in my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I am going to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come back to receive you unto myself, that where I am, you will be also. Not like his second coming. He's coming to the earth at the second coming of the set of his kingdom. We are not going to meet him. He's coming down here. Two different distinctions between the church and the nation of Israel. So let me end with this. We have two ways that we need to prepare for this. First of all, we need to have spiritual preparedness. Above all else, we need to be prepared spiritually, because we know the scriptures on what's going to happen. We don't know how it's going to happen. We shouldn't be surprised when strange things happen, because God said that it's going to happen. So how he determines he wants to pull that off is totally up to him. But we need to be spiritually prepared for whatever God brings and however he brings it to pass. Second of all, there is a natural preparedness that we need. I mean, if you know it's going to rain, you grab an umbrella, don't you? I mean, that's just being prepared. Proverbs 27:12 from the New Living Translation says this: a prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions, but the simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. In other words, we know what's coming. We know there's going to be a one world money system. We know that there's going to be food shortages and pandemics and all kinds of diseases and pestilences that are going to happen. We know there's going to be rationing of food. Is Jesus going to take us out before all that happens? We don't know how long it's going to take. We don't know when he's going to come or what we're going to go through. My humble opinion is that we have to, the church, God has to separate the church from the so-called church. If you really are going to follow Christ, it's going to get tough. And people that don't really want to follow Christ are going to fall off because they're going to want the world. If you want the things of this world, if that gravely disappoints you, if you lose everything that you have, you got to really take stock in your spirituality, because we're in this world, but we're not of it. It shouldn't be that big a deal to us. Of course, we all want peace and safety and everything for our families, but the reality is this. Listen, if we perish, we're with Jesus in heaven, so it's a win-win for us. But it's important to note the other end of that a prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. We know these things are going to happen. So we can prepare our family, our friends, our people that we know, people that we don't know, for what's coming down the road, because we see it. Listen, this is a time for us to bring as many people as we can into the ark, so to speak, before this happens. So all I can say is be prepared spiritually and do some natural preparation, and don't be afraid to share the word. Don't be in fear. I hope this has been a blessing to you. We'll see you again. God bless.